Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things. And I'm not particularly good at making faces, so today I'm gonna make no face. The first step in making no face will be taking a big block of black clay and turning it into a little ball of black clay, then introducing it to a lovely little ball of aluminium and making them kissy kissy. This then leaves me with a firm center and a soft, lovable exterior, much like No Face himself. I'll then squish another equally sized ball of clay-covered aluminium to make my body, which I'll then wrap a couple long lengths of armature wire around so that I can attach legs and feet later. A quick twist will tighten the wire and make sure it doesn't shift while I'm working on the rest of the body, and I can mark out my knee and elbow joints, then bend the limbs into the first of many poses before filling in all the gaps and covering the body wire with lots of thick worms of black clay. I'll also take a bit of time to add some more strategically placed body lumps on the rest of the double ball shaped body, which will help make No Face look extra lumpy later. To make No Face's face, I'll press a slightly smaller ball of non-aluminium filled clay onto the front of the body so it looks like a half-legged spider, then I'll cut a slit into the tip to make No Face's consumption hole. Then it's back to building up the lumps with more and more wormy dealies until No Face's mouth area is adequately lumpy and thick, then I can break out the red clay and start to fill up his mouth. Once I've smooshed it out enough to make a somewhat uniformly red pocket, I can use my ball stylus to make it look somewhat mouth-like before adding a pair of oversized upper and lower gums. Of course, my gums need some teeth, so I'll set No Face aside and crack out my translucent clay so as I can make a big pile of teeth. The first step in making teeth is to pull the clay into plenty of itty-bitty balls. Then I'll roll the balls into little oblong eggs and squish them slightly flat before poking and prodding with a flat sculpting tool to get a more toothy-like shape. Finally, some more poking and prodding with some teeny tiny ball styluses will give my tooth that perfect tooth-like look, and it's into the oven to bake. With my teeth extracted from the tray, I can get to work adding them to No Face's face by using some tweezers and a dab of bacon bond to hold them in place. Getting them lined up isn't really an issue since No Face has what we in the business like to call a very British smile. With my face in place and my teeth looking terrific, I can add lots of extra long worms of clay around the body to make sure No Face is exceptionally lumpy and gross looking. I'll then take a little extra time to try and smooth out as much of the body as I can to remove any of the fingerprints and blending seams to make sure that he's as smooth as I can possibly be bothered to make him. Finally, I'll add some last little lumps and wrinkles wherever it seems appropriate, and it's into the oven to bake. Now that my lumpy potato body is safe to handle without fear of adding fingerprints, I can wrap the limbs in extra thin worms of clay until I've got a pair of shapely legs and skinny little arms. I'll then wrap each of the connection points in lots of little clay sausages to exaggerate the lumpiness before getting to work making my hands and feet. One of the many beautiful things about No Face's design is that because he's something of an amorphous blob, even when he becomes a multi-limbed Chihiro chasing monster, there isn't a great deal of detail that I need to worry about. His feet are slightly webbed four-toed frog feet on account of eating all those frog people, and his hands are pretty much just fingered extensions of his gooey black substance. Of course, up until this point, I could be making any amorphous frog-footed faceless black god of consumption, so to make it a little bit more obvious that this is No Face, it's time to make his mask. I'll start with a little ball of white clay that I can flatten into a flattened egg, then press that into place, and well, that's it. I mean, there's really not much to it. However, before I bake it, I'll peel the mask off and add a bunch of brown clay so that I can make his long flowing brown hair underneath. Then I can pop the mask back in place on top and get that red clay back out to make a big lumpy tongue to stick into his gob. Otherwise, that's the sculpting finished, so it's into the oven to bake before adding a bit of texture and detail with my paints. Now normally I just paint the black and call it good, but I wanted to see if I could make him look extra gooey, so I'm gonna try and mix some Mod Podge and black ink to make a slightly translucent black film that I can paint over top. Now, it didn't really end up looking like anything other than the slightly waxy paint, but that's fine since it gives them a bit of a nice shine. And for a little added variation in the bland black coloring, I mixed a tiny bit of terracotta into the Mod Podge mix to touch up the tops of the lumps and bumps. It should dry pretty much to an unnoticeable shade, but will help add a tiny bit of depth. His hair will get a brown wash to add some simple shading, and I can paint the mask with that patented No Face design. Finally, a couple watery pinks and purples will add a bit of life to the inside of his mouth, and I'll give the entire thing a coat of gloss varnish to goop it up. Now this was very much a spur-of-the-moment build for me, so I had no idea what the end result would be. But I figure since I was making the Chihiro chasing version of No Face, then I should probably make a little Chihiro being chased. I guesstimated the size of Chihiro's armature based on absolutely no measuring at all, instead hoping that I could fake my way through it enough that if it turned out particularly awful, I could just take the glamour shots from far enough away that no one would really notice. Once I bend my little armature into an appropriate running from a monster pose, I can start to bulk up the base layer of clay using a pink skin tone to cover the entire armature. This will give me a body to build the clothing on later, and I find this way it's easiest to make sure my head is even remotely close to the size it should be. Because my head in real life is so comically oversized, it's easy for me to carry that into my sculptures, so by making the body first, I've got something to compare the scale against. Pro tip, if you don't want to make tiny fingers, just make fists instead. With my body finished, I can get to work making Chihiro's head, which starts out as a little lump of clay that I can then poke and prod into a terrified anime face. Now, as far as I can tell, that means perfectly smooth skin and a tiny nose, and a big screaming mouth, of course. Now, her eyes are pretty wonky, but don't worry, a little pink clay can cover that right up, then I'll stick a big tongue in place and slap some little white wormy dealy teeth in front. A couple half moons will be her ears, and I can smoosh a little toupee of brown hair on top, then add the rest of her locks in stages until she's got a perfectly acceptable brown ponytail. Once I've baked her head to keep from smooshing her brains, I can attach it to her already baked body and start to build up her outfit. Fortunately for me, it's a mostly coral colored pair of pants with an equally coral colored shirt over the top, which I can add as a single blob of clay, then not so carefully shape into her trousers and top. Some poking and prodding will give me plenty of wrinkles, and I can add the shirt flaps flopping about the bottom of her shirt, which will help to add some momentum to her run. A little red band around her waist will keep her pants from falling down, and I can add some little white wormy dealies around her shirt before tying off a bow to finish it. I'll use a Q-tip to add some color to her cheeks, then I can carefully draw some anxious eyebrows under her hair and add some big shocked pupils to make her look a little less uncanny. A quick dry brushing with some lighter oranges will add a bit of texture and highlighting to her outfit, and a brown wash will bring her hair to life. Otherwise, that's Chihiro looking surprisingly decent, which means it's time to make a hallway. In my big box of foam offcuts, I've got this strip of XPS foam that is the absolutely perfect size for my haul. Not only does it fit No Face perfectly, but it's just tight enough that I won't have room to make the shoji walls, which means I have a reason to not make them. In fact, the only thing I really need to do to make this a scene-accurate base is to turn the floor into a wood floor with extra long planks running the entire length, which I'll do by using my marking gauge to create a lip around the edge which will demarcate the floorboards. Then I can measure out equidistant spots to cut my planks. Again, I really want to emphasize that this offcut was just sitting on my shelf and I didn't measure beforehand, so it's another Bob Ross level happy little accident that it can be divided into 12 perfectly equal 1 centimeter wide floorboards. A quick coat of black Mod Podge will prime and protect the foam, and I can start to build up the dark brown base coat, followed by a series of progressively lighter shades until I've got a lovely little stretch of wooden floorboard hallway. I've got plenty of that goopy black Mod Podge mix that I used to paint No Face, so I'll slather that all over the base where he's come crashing through the wall, then I can set him down in place on top and add some more of that to the underside and around the area behind him. That leaves a little space in front for Chihiro to slot into. Now, I was pretty much finished here, but it felt a tiny bit empty in the hall, so I decided to add a couple plates of food which I made off camera. I actually made them on camera, but my SD card corrupted in the process wasn't interesting enough to do again just for the sake of a mildly entertaining YouTube video, or TikTok video if this has been stolen and uploaded on there with unbearably obnoxious music playing over top. At any rate, I've got a little monkfish on a bed of lettuce with lots of tomatoes and lemons for garnish, while on the other side No Face is knocked over the opposite table, so my bowl with a roasted pig's head potatoes and more lettuce and tomatoes has come crashing to the ground. Just behind each of these tables, I've sculpted some incredibly detailed and movie-accurate bathhouse patrons, but you can't see them because I didn't make the floor where they'd be standing. Otherwise, that's us finished here and on to the glamour shots. As always, a massive thank you to the fine folk over on Patreon who continue to support this channel despite me straight up lying to them when I told them I wasn't going to make a video this week, and a special shout out to the newest of them, Sage Bentley, Desmond, Izzy, We Chillin', Rai, Chronicles of Liz, and Yeet Mitzer. You are the unstoppable, goopy black amorphous blob that feverishly consumes the questionable content this channel produces. If you like this video, then go find another channel to subscribe to, since I've got terrible imposter syndrome at this point, since there are so many more talented and interesting channels out there that need more viewers. In fact, drop some channels in the comments below that you don't think get enough attention. Give it a couple days, then come back and see which ones tickle your fancy. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.